Well, hello everybody. This is the Schooley Mitchell Podcast. I'm Mike DeBoer, and joined as always, although this is the second episode, Dennis Schooley, who's back from vacation. I think he took his first vacation in about a decade last week. So nice to have you back, Dennis.
Well, thank you. And it was
Yeah,
lovely, a nice,
yeah,
relaxing time with family. So,
good, awesome. Well, what I wanted to talk about today, Dennis, and sort of get your thoughts on, just the topic of exit strategy, and I think this is something that maybe candidates that are exploring franchise models don't really think about. They're
yeah.
often, hey, I'm not even in yet, why would I think about when I get out? But I think we both agree that it's really important. You want to generate revenue and income for yourself, but everyone's going to get out of something eventually. You want to have an asset that you can sell and build up. So I want to hear your thoughts, Dennis, on kind of how important is it for a franchise candidate in their evaluation process to really think about exit strategy and whatever model they're evaluating.
Well, yeah, no, and you're exactly right, Mike. I mean, they absolutely should be thinking of both sides. How much revenue can I generate? And of course, most people want to know how quickly can I generate that revenue, and then what's the stream look like? And you absolutely should evaluate every business opportunity, every franchise in that light. But you're right, most people ignore the other part of that. The value that you're bringing up or building for yourself is also how does that asset continue to grow with the execution of the franchise? And really, both things should be equal, other than considering just simply instant gratification, because
Right.
the exit strategy doesn't satisfy that need that most humans have.
Right.
But true cognitive analysis with paying attention to what really should be important should consider both things. What am I generating in cash? What's going to give me stability in my lifestyle and all those things? And that's why I get in a franchise. But if I can also consider properly how much asset am I building, that equation at the end of that period of time, whether that's 3 years or 30 years, they should be put together to determine what's the best value here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know we run into this because we're a consulting business. I think sometimes people have the misconception, well, consulting businesses don't really often have a
Yeah.
great exit strategy because you can't sell yourself, right? But I know
Right.
we don't want this podcast to be us just talking all about Schooley Mitchell, but I think for this topic, it's really important. Why is our exit strategy unique, compared to other consulting businesses that are out there?
Or let's talk about other franchises
Models in
too.
general.
So
Right,
let me throw
right.
a bit in about that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if you buy real estate, and that's part of your franchise, you're going to hope that the value of that real estate goes up, and whatever the difference is between the purchase price and what you're going to sell it for whenever you sell it, that's going to add to the value you've created in your franchise, and that should be added to the revenue stream you're going to create. That's the exit strategy there. Now, I buy a building for $1 million, and it ends up going up to $1.5 million over a 10-year period. I've made another 500 grand, but that's a sort of a gradual expectation in the increase of the asset. Now, that can be applied to any set of assets, including the value of the brand, right? Because the value of the brand will drive up a price as well. So you got to look at those things. But now, when you talk about consulting businesses, you're right. Whether they're franchised or not, it's pretty difficult to have a significant exit strategy there if, in fact, the skills of the consultant are the main driver of the value to the customer, because the customer matters. That's all that matters. The customer
Right.
pays for everything. So if I'm providing a great service because I'm a good consultant, I'm very knowledgeable and smart, and I do a good job and I make good money, and I even renew with my clients, that doesn't mean there's an asset at the end of the day, because like you said, I can't sell myself. And when
Right.
I get out, I get out. Right. I mean, it doesn't mean I can't pass it on to another consultant, but there's not a big value there to create and therefore sell. Now,
Right.
our business is much different than that, because every client we get has a minimum of a 3-year annuity attached to it, because our model is that we share 50% of the savings we create for our clients for at least 36 months. Oftentimes it's much more because we continue to create more. But the point I'm making is that means it's got a future cash flow.
Yeah.
Well, a buyer of a business in a professional environment is going to look at the quality of the client base, but also the value of the cash that's coming in. And so with that 3-year actual contracted commitment to cash flow, that makes it a very strong asset. The example I always use, and I use this with lots of people that I talk to, is let's assume you save a client in our world $2,000 a month. Well, that means you're going to bill them $1,000 a month for 36 months at a minimum.
Right.
And if you decide you want to sell that business, let's say 6 months into it, well, there's still 30 months to go at $1,000 a month. Right. Somebody will pay for that cash flow. Now they're going to discount it somewhat. They might pay $27,000 or $28,000 or something, but they're going to pay an amount of money to get that future money.
Right.
And evaluate the risk of getting that money. All those things go into it, but there's a big value there. And when you've got a whole list of clients under the same sort of scenario, that just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. As you acquire clients, you increase your revenue flow, but you increase your asset value too that you're going to sell. So that's really, I think that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, compare it often to like an accounting firm or an insurance business, right? Where you can count up those residuals and that's the value, along with some of the other things that you talked about as well. And I think that, Dennis, we always get asked, and I think every potential franchisee thinks about job versus franchise, right? And sometimes they think about how does getting into business for myself in the franchising model compare to, buying a job. And I think exit's a big part of that, right? You can't sell your job, even if you make good money at it. There's no value when you get out, but when you're in business for yourself, and we think specifically a model like Schooley Mitchell, that's a significant value that a job doesn't give you, right?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, and like I said earlier, that should be the thing that you're evaluating, as long as instant gratification isn't your primary need. I mean, if that's 95% of your need, in that hierarchy of needs, then you don't have much choice. You've got to do the job. But if you're really looking to change your life, if you're looking to change your future, then you've got to consider, what can I make? How can I build it up? Am I going to exceed what I'm making now, but I have to have patience to get there? And what am I creating? And how does that add? But again, instant gratification drives so many people to make decisions that really aren't the best decisions for their long-term future, but they're kind of a required decision for current needs. And that's what a franchise is. It's trying to address the ability to change your life, to change your path. And we're pretty proud of what we've created. And there's a lot of other great franchises too. So
sure. Absolutely. And I think I always think about the fact that most of the successful business people that we think about, that we read, that we see, on TV, I mean, they've had that longer term, that longer term mindset, right? And that's how the most successful people in the world tend to operate, right?
Well, if you look at, like you just said, if you look at everybody that you really respect or admire in your community, pick the top 5 or 10, you're going to find out they pulled the trigger on something. They took a risk, they took a chance, and they went for it every single time. So that lesson, it's not an easy lesson, because again, current needs and, those types of things can override that. But really, if you want to change your life, if you want to make a better, path for yourself, you've got to pull that trigger at some point.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I think even for people that maybe they're not thinking, well, I want to sell to someone else down the road. Maybe they're thinking, I want to create a legacy, for my family to take over down the road.
Sure.
Or, I think the equation still applies, right? You want to hand something over to a spouse or to your children that has value, and you want to be able to quantify that thing that you're handing over to them as well, right?
That is the same equation. Now, in the case of the building that I mentioned earlier, you're passing it on at $1.5 million. That's their starting point. In our case, as you continue to acquire clients, you're building up that asset that you're going to turn over to your family. Your legacy is increasing every time you build your business. So and again, it's something that's going to help you with your long-term plans, not only for yourself, but for your, like you said, your legacy, for your family, your grandchildren's grandchildren, if you want.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know that's important to some people, right? That's why they want to leave corporate and get into something for themselves, is because of that legacy creation as well. Now, Dennis, if you don't mind, what have you kind of seen, again, and just in terms of our model, some of the exits that we've been able to see some of our franchisees, sell their business out over the last few years, just to give maybe listeners context to, what have we seen with some of our franchisees that have sold their businesses?
Well, we've seen exits in the multi-million dollars, because people that will build up their client base to that level where they're earning $1 million a year, they're, those kinds of things, they've got more than that. I mean, it's not the normal multiplier times EBITDA valuation here. It's much more of a present value, future cash flow. But then there's a lot of other values that go into it too, in terms of the quality of the client base, which is what you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And that includes how many referrals have you received, how many renewals, how many extra recommendations, what work is in process for those clients. So all of that sort of goes into that value. But we've seen proof in the pudding where
Right.
our successful franchisee, now most of our successful franchisees are still in the business because they love what they're doing and they're creating great value for themselves. But we've certainly seen those multiple seven-figure exits in our past. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are nice stories I'm sure for you, having started Schooley Mitchell, to see not only people change their life in terms of, the revenue they can generate, but change their lives in terms of some of those exits that we've seen as well.
You make a good point there, Mike. There is pride in having built, and I don't mean to sound prideful in a bad way, but we are proud of the fact that we've been able to build a model where people have been able to change their lives.
Right.
Whether that's through continuing income, whether that's through passing on the legacy in their family, we've seen that, or whether that's exiting and benefiting large with some nice paydays. All of that, that's part of what we've created here. Not me,
Right.
but us. Our whole conglomerate of people here have been a party to creating that, and it's pretty cool to know that that's happened. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, Dennis, is there anything, as we kind of wrap this conversation up, anything else you want to add about the importance of candidates thinking about exit strategy, or you're just on this topic at all, kind of parting thoughts you want to leave the listener?
I guess the one thing I'll bring back again is that need for instant gratification. I mean, that's such a huge driver for most people. And I know sometimes you can't avoid it, but if you can find a way to get over that, the only way to change your life is to determine what other paths can I take? How can I add to the value? You can do that in a job because you can increase your own value, but you can't just think about being where you are. That's never going to change anything unless you're 100% content with where you are. And that's great. But you've got to really sit down and use some mind space to think about how can I increase my capabilities, my value to my employer, or my value to myself by becoming a business or a franchisee, because those things, are what's going to lead to that path. But it's always contra to instant gratification, because you've got to figure a way around that to get to there. And that's really my point.
Exactly. And I think for people that are listening, that are in that process already of exploring different models, keep going back to that why, because I think sometimes when you're early in the process, you're excited and gung-ho, and you have that pain point in maybe your corporate role, but deeper in the process, maybe some fear takes over or some consternation, and then you forget, what was that why that got me kind of on this path to begin with, right? So keep going back to that and remembering that, even if you don't jump into something, at least you're thinking the right way about the change you want to make in your life.
That's why I would say to anyone that's evaluating franchises, they should make a list of what you said, their whys, their reasons, their goals, their desires, and keep that right in front of them through the whole process. Don't lose sight of that. I mean, whatever business you're looking at, whatever franchise you're looking at to meet those goals and desires and dreams, it's got to do that. But if you lose focus on that, you're right, the fear becomes overwhelming, and it's this black cloud that allows you to not move. It freezes you. But if you keep that in front of you the whole time, you can realize, yes, that's the most relevant thing to where I am right now. That's really what but not many people do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I suppose it's easier said than done, but that practice, at least, it's really important to remember. So
doesn't mean it's not good advice. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Well, Dennis, thank you for joining me, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the podcast. But for now, from Mike and Dennis, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.